Welcome back to the Cold Blooded Caffeine podcast. I'm Trey, and I am by myself this week. There is no McKendrick. McKendrick is actually out of the office this week. He is doing some work for his mentor program. He's a director for a mentor program locally here to Charleston area, and they have a mentor retreat mentor summit in Washington, D.C. this week. And so he is out of the office, and so you're stuck with just me. And because of that, because I'm kind of pulling dual roles, doing both my normal job and also covering for some of McKendrick's stuff, we're going to do something a little bit different this week. We don't have a new episode for the Cold Blooded Caffeine podcast, but we're going to actually share with you our live stream that we did this morning. It's a new thing that we're going to be doing every Wednesday. It's Coffee Time with Trey. That's me. And so I'm going to share that with you. Just a caveat here, we're still getting used to live streaming, so it's a little bit I'm a little bit all over the place, so I apologize for that in advance. But I do share some what I think are some good insights into some of the frequently asked questions that we get as coffee roasters. So I hope you enjoy this episode. McKendrick will also be out next week again. So we're going to be back to our normally scheduled podcast schedule the following week, which is the second week in February. But for now, enjoy the live stream that was recorded this morning, January 29th. Hope you enjoy this episode, and we will catch you again very soon. Good morning, everyone. All right. So we should be live on both YouTube and Instagram right now. So apologies for the late start. I was supposed to start at 9, but of course I tried to get a little fancy for my second ever live stream and experienced some technical difficulties. So today we're going to talk about a couple of things. I decided, so as we get this like live stream thing going, I want this to be an interactive thing. I want to be able to answer some questions, and I want to be able to have a back and forth dialogue. But because this is new, I fully understand that may take some time to build an audience. So I asked myself some questions today, and I'm going to answer those questions for you. So the first question that I had, these are questions that we get asked a lot as coffee roasters. So does light roast coffee have more caffeine than dark roast coffee? This is by far our biggest question that we get asked, whether we're at events or email or anything like that. And the answer to that question is maybe. It depends. So I'm gonna dive down a little bit deeper than that. So light roast coffee will have slightly more caffeine than a dark roast coffee by itself. The individual bean of a light roast coffee will have more caffeine, just a slight bit, than dark roast coffee. And that's because as the roasting process continues, you're going to burn off a little bit of caffeine. Now, caffeine molecules start to lose their integrity around 450 degrees Fahrenheit. As part of the roasting process, we typically don't exceed those temperatures in the roasting process. Now, some parts of the roaster might get a little bit hotter. Some beans might get a little bit hotter than others. So there may be some beans that lose some level of caffeine as the roasting process continues, but there's not a lot. So I say that to also say, as the roasting process continues, there is also a decrease in the amount of moisture, which also decreases the weight of the coffee bean. So a darker roast coffee weighs less than a lighter roast coffee. So if you ever get coffee from us and you get a bag, you're going to notice that it feels like there's less coffee in a light roast bag than there is in a dark roast bag. And there's not. It's by weight. And so you're getting the same amount of coffee by weight. It just feels like you're getting more if you get a dark roast coffee. That's because there's moisture loss as part of the roasting process. So I say that to say that the caffeine per bean may be a little less with dark roast, but you're going to use more dark roast if you're weighing it than a light roast coffee. And so the difference between light roast and dark roast in terms of caffeine content is negligible, because yes, light roast has a little bit more caffeine because you haven't burned some off, but you're also using a little bit more coffee with a dark roast, which has a little less caffeine. So it's going to work itself out to be negligible difference between light roast and dark roast in terms of caffeine content. Hope that makes sense. Um, the second most common question that we get asked is your coffee strong? And this one's actually pretty difficult to answer because strong in terms of coffee can mean a couple of things. It could be caffeine, it could be the amount of caffeine in it. And if that's the question that the person is asking, the answer to that is it is a standard caffeine content. So we roast 100% Arabica coffee. Arabica has less caffeine content than its close cousin, the Robusta coffee. So most of your like high voltage coffees, like anything that's advertised as world's strongest coffees, they're going to be at least mostly Robusta coffee, which has a lot higher caffeine content to it. And so as a result of us roasting Arabica coffee, which is the primary coffee that most it's almost all specialty coffee roasters and most of your like cafes and everything they use Arabica, you're going to have a standard caffeine content. So there's nothing crazy strong about our coffee in terms of caffeine. In terms of strength, like flavor, again, that's going to vary depending on what roast you get. So like we have light roasts, we have medium roasts, and we have dark roasts. The dark roasts are going to, of course, be more flavorful in terms of roastiness. Like it's going to have those bitter notes. It's going to have that what a lot of people like traditionally think of as strong coffee. It's going to be those darker roasts. We do have some of those that we sell, but we have a spectrum across the board. And then from a coffee roaster standpoint, when I think of strength, I usually think of the strength of the coffee in relation to water as you brew. So that's the third thing. When you say is your coffee strong, you could be meaning caffeine content, you could be meaning flavor, but you also could be meaning the amount of dissolved solids of that coffee being brewed into the water. And that's like, as a coffee professional, that's what I think of. Is this coffee strong? Is it watered down, or is it the proper brew ratio? Is it over extracted? Is it under extracted? All that kind of stuff. And so that is 100% dependent on the brewer. I have nothing to do with strength in terms of brewed coffee. So that is the question number 2 of our most frequently asked questions. Number 3, where does your coffee come from? So Cold Blooded Caffeine sources coffee from currently 14 different countries. We source from farms throughout South and Central America, Africa, and Southeast Asia, and we also source from Jamaica. And then the kind of follow-up question to that is, do you have relationships with all of those farms? No, unfortunately, we don't have relationships with each one of those farms individually. As a smaller coffee roaster in the scale of coffee roasters of the world, so like you have to think of us as competing in the same market as Starbucks and as Folgers and as some of these big well-established brands. We're very, very small, and so we are taking pallets worth of coffee as opposed to containers worth of coffee. And so we don't have the same kind of leverage to go direct to farm that some of the larger companies do. We are working on some of those initiatives, and we have contacts at farms that we work with, but we do not like source all of our coffee specifically from one farm. We just can't. I can't buy a container of coffee from one farm in Colombia and then buy a container of another coffee in Africa, because it would just be way too much coffee in a container load of coffee. It can be between 300 and 600 bags of coffee, and those bags are 150-pound bags, as opposed to a pallet is 10. So I can take pallets, 10 bags, so that's 1,500 pounds of coffee at a time, but I cannot take thousands of pounds of coffee at a time. I just can't warehouse that, and we just can't consume that much. So that is the question of where does your coffee come from. We source from 14 different countries, but we use an importer. We use actually two primary importers and a third backup importer to help facilitate those relationships with farms. And we do also have some farms that we work with in terms of like consulting in terms of like the conservation side, where we work with them for reptile and amphibian conservation directly, but we can't just source directly from them due to the requirements of the container loads coming in. Okay, question number 4. Are there any and okay, I'm going to say this one. This one I'm not entirely sure if it's said in joking, but we get it. If we go to a trade show, we get it at least once a show. Are there any actual reptiles in your coffee? And I can't tell that if this is a joke or not, because we get it so often. And kind of my joking response is usually, "Oh no, we just filter it through the snake skin. There's no actual snakes in it." But I honestly don't know if the person's joking or not, so I try to make light of it. But no, there's not any reptiles. There's no difference in the coffee itself from anybody else, other than our sourcing strategies and what we donate back to. The coffee itself is the same. We use an importer here based in Charleston, South Carolina, where we are, and so the containers come into Charleston and then they cross dock here. And I actually went yesterday to the warehouse to pick up pallets of coffee, and it's the same. It comes from the same warehouse as 50 other roasters here locally. It's the same coffee, but we roast it. We select coffee specifically for our purposes. So like we select 100% Rainforest Alliance coffees, and then we donate back, and that's the difference. There's no reptiles, there's no additives, there's no flavors or anything like that in our coffee that makes it different from anybody else's. It's more the relationships that we have with the industry, with the reptile and amphibian industry, where we can give back, and we can promote our conservation causes. That makes us different. So and then the last question that we get fairly often is, we have flavor notes on the packaging of the coffee, and it tells what we think the coffee is going to taste like. And so we get questions fairly frequently that ask, are there additives that make the coffee taste like that? Like the flavor notes. So like, for instance, some of the flavor notes might be milk chocolate, almonds, maybe nutmeg. Those are pretty traditional coffee notes. And the answer to that is no, absolutely not. Those are not additives to the coffee. They are interpretations of the coffee that I taste. It's similar to like wine or some of your other specialty beverages, where you're trying to communicate to a consumer what that product tastes like. And so you're going to use terms that they may be able to recall, so that they know if they like a flavor or something. So like, if I say that a coffee is dark chocolatey, tobacco, heavy smoke, you'll think, oh, that's a dark roast. I like that. I like peaty Scotch, so I might like a roasty coffee, right? Or if I say something like a bright, sparkling blueberry and something like that, you might think, oh, okay, that's a lighter roast. It's high acidic. It's got fruitiness. I might like something like that. So that's why we use flavor notes on the packaging. It does not mean that there's actually any additives that have been put into the coffee. So those are my 5 most frequently asked questions that we get from mostly trade shows. But we get them from everywhere. Other things that we get asked, do we have, so is the coffee gluten-free? Yes, there's no additives or anything that would make the coffee contain gluten. It's naturally gluten-free. We don't do anything different. We get, is it processed in a facility with tree nuts or peanuts? No, 100%. We are a 100% tree nut and peanut free facility. Nothing that comes in the store in this building has tree nuts or peanuts. My brother's actually deathly allergic to peanuts, and so I'm quite sensitive to nut allergies and allergies in general. Um, those are questions that we get quite often. But I want to hear from you. That's the idea behind this. So if you guys have any questions about coffee, whether it's today or not, we're going to keep doing these live streams, and hopefully we're going to build them to the point where we can have conversations back and forth about coffee and about conservation and reptiles and all that kind of stuff, and how it correlates back and forth together. So that was the main topic for today. And then I'll just continue talking for a little bit, because my goal for these live streams is to be between 20 and 30 minutes. We're about to hit the 15-minute mark now, so I don't want to keep everybody too long. This is just me talking. So we're probably going to be using this episode as our podcast for the week. So if you haven't subscribed to our podcast channel, this is currently live streaming. This is the first live stream from our new podcast channel on YouTube. So you can check that out. We separated that out on purpose because we're trying to grow our YouTube channel. So if you haven't subscribed to our normal YouTube channel, we please encourage you to do that. We're looking for feedback on ideas for any videos that you would like to see, coffee related, reptile related, conservation related, anything that you would like to see. Let us know. Because we're really putting a concerted effort into YouTube this year. We really want to help build that audience, because I think we have a cool niche in terms of education on both coffee and reptiles and amphibian conservation. So if you have any ideas there and you haven't already subscribed to our YouTube channel, please consider going over there and doing that. But in addition to that, we spun off our podcast onto a different channel entirely, so that it wouldn't get muddied up with hour long, 45-minute long podcasts, and then also regular 20-minute, 15-minute videos. So you can subscribe to one or the other or both, but this is currently live streaming on the podcast channel as well on YouTube. So we'll continue to do that, but I apologize for being a little late starting today. I am going to try and get back to 9 a.m. Eastern time every Wednesday. I know most of you that are on now did not hear me in the beginning because I was having some technical difficulties. So yes, last week was our first official start of our series of live streams, where we're going to go live every Wednesday at 9 a.m. But last week was a little bit different, because there was a snowstorm here in Charleston, South Carolina, which never, ever happens. And so it threw me off a little bit, because all of my podcasting equipment, all of my microphones, all of my cameras and everything were at my office, here at my office. And so I did not have any of my equipment. So I couldn't go live on YouTube last week. And so I only went live on Instagram last week. So this week I was trying to be super ambitious, and I came in early to work and I got everything set up, and my streaming platform said it did not want to cooperate. So I had to rush this morning and try and find a different streaming platform so that I could go live. And so that's why I was about 15 minutes late to get started this morning, because I went through like 3 or 4 different ones to find one that I could easily live stream both to Instagram and to YouTube at the same time. And then so that's why, I don't know, there's a little thing up here somewhere that says restream. So that's the one that I figured out that I could use today. I don't know if I'm going to stick with that one. It seems to be working just fine. I like it just fine, but we'll see. That's why I was a little late, because I was trying to figure out streaming platforms, and I tried to get too fancy all at once for this, only the second live stream ever. So that's what's going on. We are back after the snowstorm. It was kind of fun, the snowstorm, because we don't get snow here. I've been in the Charleston area most of my life. I mean, I grew up about an hour outside of Charleston, and have lived in the greater Charleston area since college. So that's been 17 years that I've been here. And so and in that time there has been 2 snowstorms. And so it's fun to experience it. It's fun to get out and play around in the snow a little bit, but it certainly did set us behind quite a bit on work because we just physically could not get into the office for probably 2 good days. Three we ended up taking Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday as work remote days for the team. So just to be safe, and so it did certainly set us behind because we could not safely get to work. We just don't have equipment like snowplows and yeah, assault trucks and things like that that some of our northernly friends have on standby during the winter months. So we were quite a bit behind coming into this week. In addition, the reason why it's just me by myself, well, I'll be doing the live streams by myself, but McKendrick is out of the office this week. He has a mentoring summit, so he participates. He's a director at a local mentoring service group, and so he is currently on his way to Washington D.C. for a mentoring summit. So I'm here holding down the fort by myself. So I after this, I've got to go make deliveries for our coffee delivery service and all that kind of stuff. So it's going to be a busy week, but still wanted to make sure that we got on, did our live stream, said hey to everybody, and caught back up after the snowstorm. Going forward, I'm hoping if it happened one time already this year, I'm hoping we don't have any winter weather. So I hope that nothing's going to take us away from our normal Wednesday morning routine going forward. But definitely didn't want to miss another opportunity. So to catch up with everyone. So we will end the live stream there, and we will talk to you again next week.